All right, welcome. Sorry, we are 1 minute behind, and that is entirely my fault. So sorry about that. But let's get into this. Welcome to everyone that's joining us today. Thanks to those who are joining us for the first time. Great to have you along. My name's Joe. This is Tam. For those of you that have seen us before, you'll know who we are. But we're going to cover off all the things to do with cash flow today, and hopefully try and simplify it a little bit. It can be a complicated thing depending on the business you're in, and it's probably the most important thing to get right in order to grow your business and be able to feel comfortable that you can expand, that you pay your bills and you can sleep at night, which if you're a business owner, is not a given. All right, so welcome, Tam.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's a bit about us.
No one needs to know about us.
Yeah. Suffice to say, both Tam and I work in the advisory area of PTP. So we're working with clients on helping them grow their business, their profit, understand their strategy, that sort of thing, and achieve their goals ultimately, which is what our whole mission as a business is.
So today we will be going through why is cash king, a bit of a case study, some common cash flow issues that we see, and then how to fix it. And then we'll go through a bit of a summary and the ability to ask questions. What I want you to do is, if you're listening to us live, put a hi in the comment section so we can see if you're there. And if you've got any questions as you go, make sure that you post them. If we can answer them on the fly, we will. Otherwise, we'll wait until the question time at the end.
So you'll see, we should have said that at the start. This is the first time we've used this platform, StreamYard. So it's a little bit different to what you will have seen in the past with Demio, although pretty well the same features. You obviously see the slides on the screen. You'll have the section on the right-hand side where you can add your questions in. And as Tam said, please feel free to do that on the way through. If we feel like it's best left to the end, we'll do that. If not, we'll answer it on the go. All right. Hi, Andrew. Okay. So cash is king. I'm sure we've all heard that saying. Why is cash king? Without getting too political, the government and things seem to be, and different bodies seem to be moving us more towards FPOS and contactless stuff all the time. Cash, you get a bit of a funny look now when you try and pay for cash at a lot of places, you find. But this is really referring to not necessarily the cash that physical cash, physical money. It's more availability of funds. As we're talking about what cash is within your business. And why is it king? Well, because you need it to grow. You need it to, as I said before, to feel like you can attack different things, invest in different parts of your business that either to grow it or to change it, make it more efficient, any of that sort of thing. If you don't have cash available, you're less confident and you're less likely to be able to go and make that decision to go and do those things. And perhaps it holds you back from doing that if you don't have the cash. Perhaps you've been burnt in the past around not knowing, what your cash position is, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit. And you felt the impact of that. So that's why it's so important that we try to build up our cash reserves. The other reasons, which is still relatively fresh in our mind around what happened with lockdowns and COVID and all that sort of stuff. A lot of people really struggle with that because they didn't have cash reserves, and cash reserves wasn't really something that was in people's mindset going into that for a lot of businesses. And having that cash to put aside for a rainy day or for a disaster or something that doesn't necessarily pop up, or on the other side, on the good side, if an opportunity comes along, if a competitor comes along and says, would you like to buy my business? You've got the ability to go and look at that. Without those cash reserves and making sure that's there, you don't have that. The biggest thing that I think, and Tam, I'd like to get your view on this, but I think the biggest thing that I see for business owners is the confidence that comes from knowing they've got cash in the bank. And that allows them to move forward and make a lot clearer decisions rather than worrying about it day to day.
Definitely. It's that peace of mind factor, isn't it? It's what helps you sleep at night as a business owner, being able to have cash flow and just take that stress. There's enough stress of being in business at the best of times, let alone with cash flow. That's usually the biggest stressor. So if we can eliminate that, it's that peace of mind factor. What Joe and I like to do is kind of educate business owners on the difference between cash flow and profit, because they are different. So cash flow is kind of measured in amounts collected or receipted, and the amounts paid or the payments that you send out. Profit, though, is measured in income invoiced and expenses incurred. The biggest difference kind of being is that in your cash flow, you are paying for after profit expenses such as loans and drawings, tax, BAS, those sorts of things. And that's why there's a difference between the two. So a business needs to be profitable in order to generate a strong, sustainable cash flow, but not all profitable businesses have strong cash flow. Why is that, Joe?
Yeah, so we're gonna take you through a bit of an example as to how this can happen, because it's a really common question that we get at the end of a financial year or end of a period of time when we're sitting down with a client to say, well, you've got a profit here. Your business has generated a profit of, let's say, $100,000, something like that, and the blank look we get and say, well, why is that not in my bank account? And if there's a tax bill associated with that, well, how am I going to pay a tax bill if I haven't got that profit sitting in my bank? And we're just going to run through why. It's very common. Like it's really very rare do they actually line up. So we're going to just use a bit of an example. This is based on something that we would see day to day. We've obviously changed the names and changed the numbers and stuff, but this is the sort of thing we'd see. So the business name is Solid Business Solutions. Bob's the tradie and he's the business owner. And we're sitting down with Bob and we said, okay, Bob, you've got a profit of $210,000. And to go with that, it's the end of the financial year. So we've got a tax bill of $57,000. And Bob's in a bit of a panic because he's only got $9,000 in the bank. So his again, really common feedback here. I'm working harder than ever. I've done really well, but I feel broke. You've told me I've got a $57,000 tax bill. I've got $9,000 in the bank. How is that possible? So let's step through that.
Definitely. So where did Bob's money go? So when we talk about that $210,000 profit, this is where he's gone and spent that. So we went and paid $50,000 cash on a ute. $110,000 he took in after profit funds as a drawing or a wage to himself to pay himself. He has $30,000 at the end of the year owing to him from customers that he hasn't yet collected. $15,000 he paid in loan repayments on assets and business loans. And he has an extra $5,000 in the bank. So at the start of the year, he would have had $4,000 in the bank, and then that makes up the $9,000. So that's where the 200 odd grand of Bob's profit's gone. It's gone out to him. It's been paid to loans. Some of it he hasn't collected, and he's paid cash for assets.
I think we check that 3 times to make sure it adds up, but it does add up, 210. But that's what we quite often do, is go through and say, and of course, why is it different? Why is it different in terms of the profit and the cash flow? Well, that $50,000 ute that he's purchased in cash, which is why we look at financing a lot of our large equipment purchases, is not actually immediately deductible. So we can't actually, that doesn't immediately impact our profit. It's only a part of that is depreciated. So maybe only $10,000 of that ends up as an expense. We've spent $50,000. Right, it's gone into that vehicle. 110K on drawings. And this is a common misconception: is that drawings in most businesses, unless they're physically paid to you as a wage as an employee of a company or a trust or something of that sort of structure, drawings are not tax deductible. They are you taking money. Are you taking profit out of your business and using it for your own use? So that has not been taxed yet. It's taxed at the end of the year. $30,000 is, as Tam said, he's owing to him from customers. Now, that might be $30,000 more than what he started with, or it might be $30,000 that he's owed if he started at zero. And again, that's tax. It's income. It's income as soon as he's invoiced it, and and he hasn't received any of it. So he's paying tax. Now he will get it, hopefully relatively soon, and he'll be able to use that to put towards the tax bill. But he hasn't received it at that point in time. Loan repayments come out of profit. They are not before profit. So again, your business has to generate enough profit to make those loan repayments, and he's got a little bit extra in the bank. So, how would he have been if we had given him his tax bill, and he's got $4,000 in the bank. So he's got a little bit left in the bank, but he's spent most of his profit on his living expenses, which is absolutely fine. We all need that, and a lot of it has gone in a big asset. So we're going to touch on the impact of that as we go through. But there's a couple of the major ones that really hurt people.
Definitely. So you can be as profitable as you like, but if you haven't collected that profit, then you're simply not going to have cash to pay your bills. So positive cash flow means that you are collecting more in money than you are spending it. And obviously negative cash flow is the opposite of that. You're spending more than what you're collecting over a period of time. So why is that important? As Joe touched on before, you can fund growth and investment inside and outside of the business if you've got positive cash flow. You don't have the mental burden that cash flow stress brings, and you can take advantage of opportunities that arise that others necessarily can't if you have the cash to be able to do that. And that's things like growing your business, taking an opportunity, buying an asset if needed, those sorts of opportunities that come up. Can I run through this one, Joe? So why is cash flow so difficult?
So it is a really difficult thing because, and hopefully this can illustrate. It's really hard to explain why, but hopefully this illustrates why it can be so complicated. Is that we're looking at cash flow and making a decision about how we spend money in the now, in the current. So that's our middle part there. So what most people do when they look at that, whether it be in business or personally, is my experience, is the first thing they look at is how much we've got in the bank. So I was talking to a client the other day that had made a decision to spend a significant amount on a capital asset when they had 250 grand in the bank and got about 2 or 3 months down the track and went, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Because at that point in time, that 250, it seems like they've got a lot of cash in the bank and it seems like it's pretty comfortable. So if we just look at the cash in the bank, it's a very, very poor indicator of exactly what cash flow we're going to have available, or what cash we're going to have available in the future, obviously, because it's right now. Some people will then look at debtors, so what they're owed from people, and the creditors, what are they going to pay at the end of the month as well, to give them an idea of, okay, well, we should collect roughly this much, we're going to pay out that much. Okay, so our bank might move this much, and then they might look at their monthly commitments as well, which is, as Tam mentioned before, about the loan repayments. So what are our loan repayments doing on a month by month? They generally stay relatively consistent. And again, when do they come out, and what impact is that going to have on the bank account? So that's fine, but it really doesn't give you. It really gives you a very small window of what your picture is when you're deciding what to do with your cash, whether to invest it or understanding what's actually available to you. Oh. Then we have a look at the. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, Joe, we're both clicking at the same time.
We're both operating the slideshow. So the next part to this that is very important to consider is past stuff that will impact your current cash flow. So this is things like late lodgements. If you haven't caught up to date with your tax or your BAS or your super or any of that sort of compliance stuff, then that's not considered in this current position that you're looking at right now. That's a bill that's going to come, that's going to pop in, that's going to need to be paid. More than likely, if it's late, pretty well immediately. So that's obviously the reason why we try to keep on top of those lodgements, or understanding what that looks like as much as possible. Past decisions around how you purchase assets, or like that example I gave before, where the client thought, well, yep, I was fine to purchase that thing for 60 grand, and they weren't. And inaccurate quoting. So it may well be that you've made decisions around quoting jobs or selling something for a certain price or whatever it might be, and that doesn't come through until the job's been completed, and will impact your cash flow now as opposed to when you made that call. Over ordering of stock is another one. So we've got too much stock on hand. That decision's been made in the past, and we're not adjusting our ordering habits leading into where we are now. So it affects us now and also into the future, because obviously a lot of the time when we order, particularly say retail inventory, we don't receive it immediately. We might receive it 3 months, 1 month, 6 months from when we ordered it. So unless we're on top of what's coming and when that invoice is there, it can really sneak up on us. So that's the second part. And then the third part, which is really important, is the future. So that is, and this is where people get caught, I would say in my experience, 99% of the time, is around the top three things here. And this is where a lot of businesses fall over. So income tax, BAS, superannuation, and then longer term creditors. So again, these might be things that you've ordered or that you've committed to, but they're not going to be due for, might not be 12 months, might not be until 12 months away or 6 months away or whatever. It's far enough away that they're not on top of your mind. And that income tax one is, the year you're in now, are we putting the money aside to say, well, we know we're going to have a tax bill at the end of the year. It might not be due for a little while after it, but we know it's going to be there. And if we're not allowing for it, we're spending that money, forgetting about it. And for businesses, we're doing a lot of tax planning at this time of the year. Some businesses, that tax bill might be quite small. It might only be a few $1,000s. Well, for others, we're talking to them and they're having to put aside, hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. So if you haven't allowed for that and you haven't put it aside, you can imagine how that's a major issue, causes ongoing stress and ongoing issues with having to put that on payment arrangements, catching up, all that sort of thing. So being aware of that. BAS is another one, quarterly. The bigger the business, the bigger that amount, whether that be monthly or quarterly. Superannuation, that's moving more towards paying it as you actually make the pays to your team, which is probably going to be the best way to do it anyway, even while you don't have to, because it just gets you in that habit of doing it. But again, you've got a big team, you get to the end of a quarter and you've got a, $15,000, $20,000 superannuation bill you didn't see coming, or that you've forgotten about that was happening. It's a difficult one to get on top of. And again, it generally builds, and it's a couple of those things that add on to each other. So that's why it's so hard. You're not just looking at the now. Again, most people look at here. We look at the current, and that gives us a really poor indication of what's coming in the future, and what the decisions in the past have done. So our advice there is keep everything up to date and complete some forecasting. That's pretty straightforward.
Definitely. It's a really complex thing, Joe, isn't it? And what we tend to see that happens is business owners are so busy in their business, they don't have time to lift their eyes and really look at this sort of stuff. And that's kind of why we wanted to show you, why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult to grasp and get your head around in business sometimes? Is it because it does include those past, the current, and the future things as well?
Yep.
So some of the cash flow issues that Joe and I see are profitability lacking. So you need to actually be making a profit to start with in your business to be able to have good cash flow. So educating yourself on those key levers in your business, making sure that you're looking at reports and being aware of the profit that might be bleeding in certain areas, not budgeting for tax and BAS, so not putting that money aside. And what happens is if you leave it in your everyday business, say, trading account, you end up spending money that's not yours without even really realising. So high loan repayment, so not making enough profit to actually cover your monthly commitments, and actually empowering yourself and knowing what those monthly commitments are. Sometimes we kind of make decisions and you're like, oh yeah, $1,500 a month for this new car, that's not that's pretty good. But when you add that to already all your other commitments, it ends up being like, oh, okay, well, I need to, at a minimum, turn this over to be able to just break even from a cash flow point of view. So kind of knowing what that looks like. Not monitoring your inventory and WIP levels. So having high stock levels that aren't turning over, high WIP that's unbilled or not managed correctly. Poor invoicing and data collection process. So not invoicing. People aren't going to pay you if you don't invoice. So either not invoicing when jobs are done, or not chasing up debtors or people that owe you money, not enforcing your credit terms, those sorts of things. Large amounts of personal spending, as we said before. One of those things where people don't realise that their drawings aren't tax deductible. So if you're spending a lot of the business's funds, it's all after profit. So you will be making a profit but have bad cash flow. And or buying assets for cash, so not understanding that that's going to take up cash flow. So how do we fix your cash flow? Starting with your profit. As I said before, you can't have good cash flow with no profit. So knowing those levers and what numbers, knowing your numbers. It's something that Joe and I say all the time, and it is a thrown around term, isn't it? Know your numbers, Joe.
Yeah.
but it is so critical. You need to know what profit you're making, what gross profit margin you've got, net profit margins, and what levers you can actually pull to improve profit. So there's only 4 of them, isn't there, Joe? So there's increasing your sales, increasing your charge rates, decreasing your cost of goods sold, or improving your overheads. There's only the 4 levers that you can pull in your business to be making more profit. So knowing what ones you can pull and what ones you can't, and what you can actually do about improving that profit. And as I said before, knowing the cash flow break-even point. So you can make a profit, but what after profit expenses do you have, such as loan repayments and drawings and those sorts of things, do you need to be taking into account to know what level of sales you need to be making per month to at a bare minimum to be able to keep that cash flow ticking along?
Yep. This is a really simple one, and a lot of our clients use it. Some don't. It's amazing the amount of new clients that come on that haven't seen this before. That we talk to them about it, and it's just a really simple thing. Putting aside money for your tax and your BAS. So we call it using the bucket system. It's basically creating another bank account that puts the money aside that's not yours. Really, withholding tax, which is your tax you're keeping on behalf of your team when you pay them wages, your super, your GST, all those sort of things. You're just holding on to that to give to the ATO or to give to super funds or whoever. So you're the bank for that. We don't want to be using that unless we absolutely need to, and really that should just be the massive exception and not the rule. And putting it aside in a bucket just removes that temptation. As Tam said before, if it's in the trading account, it's in too big of it's in with too much other stuff, too much to consider. And it just gives you an inflated appearance of what you've actually got available to use. So set up a bank account, put the PAYG super away each week, fortnight with your pay. So most people, when they pay their wages, it's the net amount that comes out. That's only part of the expense. That's the bit that gets to the team. The super and the withholding tax, that's the full expense. So we recommend doing that and making that transfer at that point in time when you make that pay, because it's very easy to see for you or your bookkeeper or whoever's doing that to see, well, here's exactly what the super is, here's what the withholding tax is. We move that as well. We've allowed for the full expense. And there's nothing left in the bank account that's going to have to be paid out to someone else later. Excuse me, having a set amount put aside for your BAS and your tax as well, that you put away and's not touched. So that's your GST and your income tax as well. So we can work out at the start of the year roughly what we think your tax is going to be for the year ahead, for you to put some money aside based on what you're planning to make in terms of your profit. It's where that planning comes into it and is very important. And then you either pay those during the quarter if you're on an installments, during the year if you're on an installment system, or you've put it aside in the bank. So when you get to the end of the year, using Bob's example before, we haven't got to a situation where you've got $9,000 in the bank and you've got a $50,000 tax bill. So putting that aside just means that it impacts those decisions all the way through. Now, it means that you don't have as much money to spend when you look at your bank account, but that's right. You actually don't have as much money as you think to spend, because that will be used later. So if you spend it, you don't have it. You've got to make it later on. So it's a bit more nuanced than that, but that's really how we go about doing that. It's very important. Very important.
And I think it as you said, Joe, it stops you from spending the money that isn't yours. Like I always say to everyone that there could be $150,000 sitting in your tax account. It's not your money. Don't take it out, because the minute you take it out and start spending it, you're robbing from your future self, I suppose, for when those bills fall due. And it's a really big red flag. So if you do not have enough cash flow in your trading account for next week's wages, for end of month bills, there's some really big red flags in your business. And that's when you need to put your hand up to your advisors and say, hey, I do have cash flow problems. I'm always dipping into my tax account. I need help. Because it's the biggest red flag that we see is when people put the money aside, bring it back, put it aside, bring it back, but not for the right purposes.
The two biggest reasons that you will see a business fall over or go into liquidation, go broke, whatever terminology you want to use. will be this. This will be large. This will be a very large portion of it is unpaid tax and superannuation and that liability just getting too great for them to get on top of. And the other one is work in progress and management of projects, which we'll touch on a bit later, and collection of funds. But this is massive, and it's very easy to deal with. So as Tam said, it's not a nice thing to work out, okay, well, I'll put that money aside and I'm running a bit short, but you want to work it out then and deal with it then, and start to pull on those levers you mentioned before, Tam, to get that right, rather than get 12 months, 18 months down the track and be in a position that's just completely unretrievable. You can't come back from that.
So knowing those monthly loan commitments, don't overcommit yourself. The amount of business owners that I speak to and I say, what's your monthly loan commitments? And they have no idea. They actually don't know what that quantified figure is. And you need to actually consider that when you're getting new loans, and to know what the effect on future cash flow is going to be. And if that's doing that cash flow break-even calculation and figuring out, is that going to be a realistic target for you to hit from month to month? Are you, if you take on this new loan, that's just gone and put an extra maybe 20 grand of sales on your top line that you need to achieve for the month. Is that actually a realistic target, or are you going to be overcommitting yourself? So actually knowing what that is, knowing what your cash flow break even is, and being really super informed and not just buying assets for the sake of buying assets. We see it a lot at this time of year. Salesmen are awesome. I had a client call me yesterday and they're like, what did he say? The guy down at Burson's, he's like, he said that this is like free. It's a free asset because it's under the 20 grand write-off. And I laughed because it's not that at all. You're still going to be spending the money. And I think salesmen at this time of year like to kind of say, tax deduction, this is a write-off, those sorts of things. You're still going to be paying for it afterwards. So don't buy assets either on loan or not if you can't afford them.
Yep.
Inventory. So this one, be careful with how much inventory you have. Is it moving over? Is it turning over? Is it the popular things? Do you have a purchasing budget and rules around that? Are you monitoring what's selling and what is not? Or do you have a shop or a warehouse full of stuff that you're not really moving? Because that ties up your cash flow. You need, the amount of business owners that I speak to about, particularly in retail, that have an emotional connection with what they're buying. They really love it. They love their good. They love the goods that they're buying or their product. They love it, and they just like to get pulled into those sales rep conversations when they're trying to sell things. But you've got to really look at your data when you've got inventory, knowing what is selling, what's not, asking customers what do they want to see in your shop, and as I said, having those purchasing budgets and rules around that so that you can monitor that you don't then have too much stock in your shop or your warehouse. Do you want to go through the WIP, Joe?
Yeah, sure. So WIP stands for work in progress, and it applies to mainly service businesses that do larger projects or longer term projects. So they're not necessarily ones that are done in the same week or the same month even. Certainly not a retail type business where it's a transaction that occurs on the day. This is more things like think about a builder would be a common example of this. So they're running a project with a large amount of expenses, a large amount of income, but it's spread out over the life of the project. So making sure that your progress claims, understanding the timing of those, both in and out, so that's paying expenses and collecting money as well, that it lines up, that the cash flow lines up. And that's something we do quite often with clients, is a bit of a forecasting exercise on some of their larger projects, because it is a case of, they can find themselves in a position where they're out of pocket a lot of money before they recoup some of that. And we have shown in the past on these webinars the difference between a well negotiated and organised contract with good cash flow terms versus the opposite of that, and the fact that they make the same profit at the end of the day, but the stress and ability to complete that project and finish it is very different pending those things. And again, you see a lot of builders go broke. This is most of the reason why that's the case. So measure your WIP, understand how much is there. How do you measure your WIP? Well, you keep track of the expenses that are associated with that project. And most often that's direct expenses like materials, as well as the labor that goes into completing that project, and understanding how much you're going to be out of pocket, and lining up the income as much as possible with that. The amount of clients that I've had win projects for the sake of winning it and to keep things moving, and then realize later on that the cash flow is going to be a real challenge, is a major issue. And quite often you're almost better off not taking those projects on. The other thing I would say, coming back to the opportunities thing before, is if you've got plenty of cash in the bank and you can fund some of those projects and they're bigger ones, then you've got the opportunity to take those on, because you've got a cash reserve there that allows you to eat into, and take those and win them at more favourable terms for the person that's putting the work out there. So again, just be mindful of that, and having a ceiling and ensuring you have things in place to monitor that each month, so it's not getting too out of hand. A ceiling basically just means that that your expenses are not getting to a point where they're going past a point without you collecting some of that money to cover it. If that's applicable to your business, make sure you're aware of that. All right, poor debtor collecting and invoicing, another major one. Who likes doing invoicing and collecting debtors? Not me. I don't think anyone don't really like anyone likes doing that. You're right. But it's a major one. Obviously, as Tam said before, sounds really obvious, but if you don't ask for payment via an invoice, people aren't going to pay you. And whilst we all know that, I think sitting down and doing it when you would rather be doing whatever it is that you do day to day, it can be a real pain. So particularly when you're starting out your business and it's only maybe you just doing it, so you're having to carve aside and put that time aside, it is difficult. But not billing when the job or the service is completed just means that it's there's a separation between you completing it and putting some time and hours and materials potentially into that and being paid for it. It also loses value over time. The longer it takes you to bill, generally speaking, the longer it takes that person to pay, because they've either forgotten about it or whatever it might be. You might get more questions about it. It's more time, more wasted time. So bill as soon as you can after you've completed the thing. Not following up people to pay you. So again, a difficult one to do. If you're not the squeaky wheel, you won't get the oil. So just whilst we're going through a tight cash flow period at the moment in business and in the economy, you've got to be that. So make sure you have clear debtor terms, and that you are, and you're touching on down lower there, completing checks before you extend credit to people. So don't just give that away. Make sure they can pay you. Continuing to do work for people who haven't paid you as well over time, not a great idea. And completing checks before you extend credit to people. So as I touched on before, don't just give it away for the sake of it. Make sure that you are sure that they're going to be, as sure as you can be, that they're going to pay you. And PPSR and that sort of thing and personal guarantees can sometimes be worthwhile if the amounts are large enough. So if you're not sure about that, just give us a yell. We'll talk to you about that.
Beautiful. So large amounts of personal spending, as I said before, not sticking to a wage or taking extra out of the business when you can't afford it. So quite often as business owners, we're like, oh, yeah, again, going back to that table that Joe had before, I've got plenty of cash in the bank. I'm going to, go on this holiday, or I'm going to get this thing, but you don't actually know at that, one snapshot of time when you're making that decision whether the business can afford it or not, and you're not really considering what's coming up, what else have I got to come in. So all of those extra things taking from the business sometimes are just eating away your cash flow. So being aware of what cash flow is going to allow, and try and actually stick to that set monthly or weekly or fortnightly wage for yourself. Don't just use the business as like your personal spending little slush fund, because you just need to consider what's coming up and if you can or can't do that. Buying assets for cash. So again, tying up the cash isn't advisable. if obviously if you've got a large cash reserve there and it's better not to pay interest, then absolutely. But generally speaking, what we see in probably 90 to 95% of businesses is that they can't really afford to tie up that cash, and particularly if they're not income producing assets. So doing it on a vehicle or that sort of thing when they are not directly related to the income that you're producing, probably not a smart move. So always look to finance those. Do you also have an asset policy? So do you know, again, it comes back to knowing those monthly commitments, but do you know when you need things? Do you have questions that you ask yourself when you do go to have an asset? So you know that it's not just a nice to have, that it isn't a have to have asset. Beautiful.
So what does unhealthy cash flow give you? It's, as we've covered off on, it's increased stress and decreased enjoyment in your business. So you're under the pump all the time, which makes it very difficult to enjoy what you're doing, but also to grow or to think about things outside of what's happening today. Overdue bills that create a snowball effect of debt over time. So you might have interest on things, you might have additional cost for not being able to pay that. Whether that be through an overdraft or credit card or whatever it might be, or just creditors charging you interest, inability to grow and move forward. So again, if you're just stuck in the day-to-day paying your bills, very difficult to grow your business and take it forward. And there will be times, I won't say might, there absolutely will be times in your business when that's going to be the case. It's going to be tight, and there will be a number of those, and that's okay. It's not all smooth sailing, but ideally, we want to create the environment that allows it and gives it the best chance to grow and move forward. And if you haven't got cash, it's very difficult to do that. And that moves on to the last point, which is no money to invest in growth opportunities. So if there's something that's there, that's not necessarily buying assets or doing anything like that. It might just be, well, as I said before, the funding of a project. So you're going to need to tip a bit in to get that going. And if you haven't got the spare cash flow there, you're just going to be very reluctant, or you should be very reluctant to take that project on. Versus healthy cash flow, Tam.
That's right. So smoother operations in your day-to-day, being able to have the cash ready to make important decisions instead of kind of running hand to mouth each month. It just gives you that peace of mind factor. Money to invest in growth opportunities and increased enjoyment in your business. No more sleepless nights or worrying about bills. They're kind of all the effects of being able to have that healthy cash flow.
And again, we just cannot overemphasize the that last one there in healthy cash flow. How impactful that is on business owners, and we work with hundreds of business owners. The ones that find themselves in a position, have done the work to be in a comfortable position with their cash, and not overspent and not done all those things and reserve the money. They're the ones that are very clear and able to do that. We've all felt like this, where there's a million things coming at us, and that does result in sleepless nights. And if we can take that away as much as possible, and understand how we can change that, it makes a massive difference, not only to the business but to people's lives as well.
And it all comes down to that education and discipline, doesn't it, Joe? So educate yourself on where you're at. What can you do to affect it? Ask for help if you need it. And then having the discipline to stick to what the plan is as well, and not to kind of just think, oh yeah, I'll have some of these nice to have things at the moment.
Yeah. All right. So a bit of a summary. Know the difference between profit and cash flow. So we touched on that before. There is a big difference between making a profit and having cash in the bank. And hopefully we've sort of shown a pretty common example as to why that is. So just keep that in mind. Understand the past, current, and future position. So don't just look at that middle column or the middle part of that table I showed before. Look at what's coming from the past and make sure you've got all that up to date, and think about what's happening in the future. Just to clarify on that, it doesn't need to be something you look at every day. The cash flow forecasting and that sort of thing might only be weekly, monthly sort of project that you're looking at how that's going and making decisions from there. When it's a bit tight initially, it might be a bit more regularly, but as you get on top of it, it will be less so. And it doesn't need to be to the cent. It's just got to be good enough to make decisions. Keep in mind that cash is king, and that if you have cash and reserve money in your business, it does open up so many more opportunities. No profit equals no cash flow. If you cannot have good cash flow if you don't have profit. So start with the profit. That's where whenever a client comes to us and says, I'm a bit tight with cash flow, I can't pay this bill, we always look at performance as opposed to where the money's gone. We start with, okay, are you making money to begin with? Because if you're not making a profit, you can't have cash. Or it's only going to be very short-term cash. Maybe you borrowed some money from somewhere, you're going to have to give it back. Know your cash flow levers. As Tam said before, there are only really 4 profit levers, and there's not many more cash flow levers that you can pull either. So just be mindful of those and which ones are applicable to your business, and apply those tips that we gave you across all those areas. There are other things, but that would cover 99% of issues that we see with cash flow. So if you do those 5 or 6 things we've just been through, that will really, really help. And as we said a couple of times through this, reach out if you're not sure. If you're not sure about anything that we just discussed today, or you're not sure about what you should have or how your cash flow should look, or any of that sort of stuff, just yell out. More than happy to, Tam or I, or your client manager, or anyone that you deal with, more than happy to run through any of that stuff. All right.
Beautiful. Is there any? Oh, we did it again. Has anyone got any questions? We're at that, we've tried to kind of keep it right on that 45 minute, which is good. So please, if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat box, and we will be able to answer them for you.
Just while we're doing that, I think it's just revisiting that point about the levers. It can be a bit of an uncomfortable truth that there's only certain things that can be changed in your business. That it is slightly more nuanced than that. Like it's there's a number of different things under those 4 headings, but really being mindful that unless you can change those things and your business model sort of floats and is something that creates demand amongst people who will buy from you, that you've really got to consider whether the business is going to work for you longer term, particularly if you're going to be requiring large amounts of money or a certain amount of money from it and it can't produce that. Don't force that. That's if we can sort of take something away from this. Like if people sort of think, I'll take the money out and I'll go and do this stuff and I'll just make it work later. It just doesn't work. And that's where people get into trouble. So please don't. We're not here to act as the fun police with cash, but we are here to act as the people that will stop you going bankrupt. So run it past us. We'll find a way to help you do what you want to do, but don't just go and do it and assume it's going to be okay, because it may not be. And we can know pretty clearly and help you before you go and make that decision. All right. I think we have just a thank you from Belinda. No worries. That's absolutely fine. We've got a couple of minutes left. If anyone has any other questions or comments from the session today, please feel free to put them in the comments link.
But hopefully that was of some value to everyone and goes through a little bit of the complexity around why cash flow is really hard for business owners and why you can get yourself into trouble without even realizing that you're going to run into trouble, I suppose, isn't it, Joe? Yep. It's
and you can't foresee everything. Like that's the reality of life also, but being in business is that there will be things pop up from time to time that you can't plan for, and that's okay. Like you can't take that variable away. But if you've got a bit of a reserve there and you've thought about those things and implemented those good practices, then the damage that comes from those things that pop up won't be anywhere near as great. All right. So it looks like we're all done and dusted. No further questions coming through there. If you have any following this, if anything sort of pops up for you afterwards, please feel free to reach out to us. That's our details there. So you can give us a call. You can send us an email. You can reach out to Tam and myself if you've dealt with us before, or reach out to Amy on the marketing email address and she'll point you in the right direction. So thanks, Austin. Appreciate that. Good. You catch up with Max and Aidan about the flash report. Awesome. That'll get right into this sort of stuff. So that's really good. No worries, Andrew. Thanks for coming along. Please reach out if you're interested in discussing that further or you have any questions. Otherwise, thanks for coming along. Really appreciate it. And we might call it there. Tam, what do you think?
Sounds good. Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. Have a happy end of financial year for everyone too.
Yeah, we won't be. This is our last month of the
year.
financial year, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. This month will go pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thanks, everyone.